So if you wouldn't mind just sharing what organization you represent and or kind of overall theme of the organization, thank you very much. And if you wouldn't mind kind of what county or what city you're coming from as well, that would be fantastic. If you want to put that in the chat or take yourself off mute.
Well, I guess I'll start. I'm Kim McCaslin. I'm with the Greater Erie Community Action Committee, which is a community action agency in Erie, Pennsylvania. I do the marketing and fundraising for my organization.
Perfect. Thank you. I see some folks from Lancaster, Clearfield, and Center counties, Bucks County, York. Thank you. Any other counties we haven't mentioned? Some folks in Cumberland County. Fantastic. Altoona, Coming, Clinton. Okay, so pretty broad scope of folks. Perfect. Philadelphia. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jody Foster from Community Care Behavioral Health. I'm a recovery consultant with youth and young adults. I cover 42 counties in PA, so I'm all over.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So again, my name's Beck. I'm our CEO here at CAAP. And so I want to start today to kind of get our conversation going. Thank you for everybody for sharing where you're from and a little bit about what you do. I just got a reboot notification on my computer. So I hope to not lose you. If I do, I will be back as quickly as I can. Technology is fantastic, right, everybody? So what I'd like to do to start is to share a quick video. I really, as I said in my opening remarks today, I think video is really a media that helps to kind of get conversations started. I think it can be more impactful more often than words. So I want to share a short video that I think is an important perspective when we think about DEI and HR. So bear with me for just a moment as I share my screen.
When I go for an interview, it's like see the facial expression.
I'm not sure you're actually sharing your sound, and we might be hearing the reflection from your speakers.
Okay, thank you for that. This is why I had Leslie do this earlier, because I admittedly.
When you share your screen, there's a little thing on the left bottom side that says share sound.
Yep, we should be good now. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
When I go in for an interview, I usually see the facial expression.
You're not what I expected, or, oh, you don't look how you sound.
Based on my last name, they're expecting a Caucasian person, and in comes me.
I didn't even have a chance because I had an email address with an AOL on it. The employer just saw that and thought, oh my God, the woman's old.
She started asking a little bit more personal questions and then just flat out asked how I was doing with the ladies.
As a teacher, I always teach my kids to include everyone, but for some reason, as adults, we've lost that.
The data on more diverse teams is absolutely irrefutable.
In terms of your revenue, your earnings, and in terms of how successful you are as a business.
Data is only great if we can turn that into insights and do something meaningful with it.
I think one of the most damaging phrases in history is that we've always done it this way.
If you hire an employee and they don't see people that look like them in leadership in the organization, they're not going to stay in the organization.
If you can't see it, you can't be it.
I don't necessarily want to fit in. I want to be the best. I want an opportunity to shine. And I want to do something that hasn't existed before.
Don't hire me because I'm a box to check off.
Hire me because I'm the best person for the job.
I can't change my race, I can't change my sexuality, I can't change who I am, but I can change the way that I treat people.
Get comfortable with being uncomfortable and be willing to do the work.
Diversity and inclusion is not an HR problem to solve. It's not a talent acquisition problem to solve. It is something that the organization really needs to mobilize around at every single level.
Be yourself, and you will draw the same people that have the same interests as you, and you don't have to be fake.
Now that I'm actually able to walk into a professional work setting and be myself comfortably, I realize that I'm not monitoring every step I make. I'm actually there and flourishing as an employee.
We're just as ambitious, just as motivated, just as driven, and just as hungry as anybody else.
The challenge is finding the great talent. It's like a needle in the haystack. And so if somebody could help us find that needle, that would be amazing.
So I've stopped sharing. Yes, I have. Thank you. I want to show that video because I think it's an important perspective that a lot of times when we work in HR, right, there's this perspective that, DEI has to be our job to help make sure it happens within the organization. And I think where I come to this work and thinking about, my own master's program that I went through in the world of HR, a lot of what we talked about pretty regularly, it wasn't about, yes, we learned about labor laws and we learned about, unions and all of those things and how they work together. But overwhelmingly, part of what we talked about more so was about how connecting people back to what they do on a daily basis helps them to drive and be more successful and be more passionate, and to help them feel connected back to mission on a day-to-day basis. What is it that they do every single day and how does it impact the overall mission for the organization is such a critical part. And so when I think about how DEI works within HR and within organizations, part of what I would really say to everybody on today's call is that it's about creating a culture as a team, and that DEI work is built from there, right? And so I'm curious if, for those of you who are on the meeting right now, if you've done any work so far on kind of thinking about what's the culture that you want to embody. That could look like a value statement. It could look like a statement that's built off of your overall mission. It could be something that you've brought together to say, right, this is the values of what we want to embody and what that looks like on a day-to-day practice, how we treat each other, how we engage with our clients, how we engage with one another, our teammates, et cetera. Anybody started to kind of do any of that work so far? And if not, that's okay. No criticism, certainly. Just want to understand sort of where everybody is at this point.
I mean, I guess when I first became executive director, the one thing that the culture here I wanted to change was it was always the ED was end all be all. And I wanted to change more of like an inclusive, like a management team. So I formed the management team because I don't know everything about the programs, and you need others' perspectives. So that was one small thing that I've done so far. And we meet every other month, talk about our programs, challenges, successes. And so that's one small thing I've done.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Michelle. Thank you for being brave enough to actually go off mute and sharing.
I found the mute or unmute.
I'm happy to share as well. My name is Luisa Oliva-Wolf. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives at Community Progress Council in York County. I see some friends on the line. And we have had an opportunity to have a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee that's really been focused on a few different areas. And one of them specifically is hiring, retention, and advancement. So how do we create pipelines for folks to move up within our organization? How do we review our job descriptions to make sure that we're casting a broad net? How do we assure that the people that are sitting across the table in an interview represent our agency and are diverse? So we've made some practices and policy changes to support that work, but we still have a long way to go. But we're also in strategic planning. And so we had the opportunity to reflect what were our values, in the previous cycle, and what are they now and how are they different and how do they reflect some of the work that we've been doing very intentionally, over the last few years.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that, Luisa. I appreciate it. Anyone else have anything that they want to share about culture work that they've done, or it could be in a current position or position you've held in the past? So I would share that for most of the organizations that I've worked for, in my experience, they've been really, I would say, tumultuous in terms of change. The change is happening every single day, and I know that that's true of most organizations. But it was an organization that had been steeped in a lot of tradition, right? And really quickly, we were trying to catch up with the technology changes that were happening and how we were integrating those. And what we were seeing were there were lots of layoffs, right? And so I think similarly, right, we have a lot of mandates that are coming in with COVID vaccines, right? And folks are turning over really quickly. And so similar situation with that organization. And there was a lot of survivor syndrome that started to happen. Anybody familiar with the idea of survivor syndrome? Yeah, I see some smiles. So those of you on camera, thank you. Right, it's like this guilt that you sort of feel from being left behind. You talk about, you should have been here when this happened. And you sort of also feel like, you're constantly worried about what's going to happen next in a lot of respects. And so it's true. And so I think culture became a really hard thing to try to develop and be thoughtful about in that climate. And I think is probably similar to what's happening now too, because you're sort of in this unknown period of time. But again, I would say that it's a really critical part of the work that we all need to do in order to help people feel sort of, you got to give them this sort of safe space to share. You've got to help them to feel like it's okay to have conversations about what they want and what's lacking now. And sometimes as leaders, for those of you who are managers or CEOs or executive directors, it can be hard to take that information in because it feels so critical, right? It feels like, oh, I've spent so much time, I've spent so much effort trying to drive this work, and now folks are criticizing everything that's happened. But the reality is, when you ask for feedback, guys, you have to be willing to get that feedback back. And that's sometimes I think a hard lesson to learn. And so for me, I spend a lot of time trying to be thoughtful before I go into a meeting, that I know that I'm giving this opportunity for people to share dialogue, to sort of talk myself up, right? I listen to certain music, I pump myself up. When I'm actually working out, I might go for a run or a walk, or try to do something else to kind of center myself so that I'm prepared for that conversation. And remember that it's criticism, but it's criticism that moves us forward. And that's difficult sometimes. So I'm curious, for those of you who have done some I'm going to call on Michelle and Louisa, if I may, since you all shared with me, when you've started to kind of do the strategic planning work and you've had some of these culture conversations, I think it's also a really critical part to think about who are the right folks in the room. And so have you talked about or been thoughtful, I guess, about, sorry to put you on the spot, about who else is a part of those conversations? So, right, it could be, yes, your managers, but is it your frontline staff? Is it folks that are more kind of in the day-to-day? I don't like to say boots on the ground, but sometimes that's the easiest way to describe it, boots on the ground folks. Because a lot of times as managers, right, we don't remember what it's like to sit in those positions.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm happy to share. So our DEI committee was very intentionally set up to cast a broad net. So all of our leadership team is included, but that's intentional so that we can show our commitment to DEI. And the committee is actually ran by 3 co-chairs, all of which serve in a variety of roles at our organization. So we call our client-facing folks coaches. So we have a coach, we have a manager of the coach who was recently promoted from coach to manager. And we also have a teacher actually who sits on our chair committee. So they're bringing different perspectives. And then we have representation from all of our programs at a variety of different levels. So we've intentionally made it really accessible. We talk about it at a lot of different groups so that other folks can join us if they're really interested in the work. Additionally, I mentioned earlier that we have kind of subcommittees that have formed. So even if you're not in the larger DEI committee, we have some work that we're doing, and we reach out to folks that we know would be really supportive in that work. So our hiring, recruitment, and retention committee, for example, we've reached out to newer team members to say, hey, you just went through this. Come and tell us about your experience, because you're right, 4 years ago is when I was hired. So I don't remember what that looks like. And it could be very different from that day to today. So casting a broad net, I think, is really important, and making sure you have different representation of different voices at the table, both in the way that they interact in the agency, but also in who they represent and the multidimensionality of those identities.
Yes, absolutely. Well said. I could say it no better myself. Thank you. Anyone else, Michelle, or anybody, quite frankly, who wants to join, that's been in the conversation, that's been involved in strategic planning and sort of what the selection process, and it could be an example of what happened that was really bad too. That's okay. And if you don't, you can change your name so you can remain anonymous if you like. That's okay.
Yeah, kind of like what she said, you need that diversity. Here, I hate to say this, but it kind of always felt like the ED was just the dictator. They chose the programs. Here's how it's going to roll out. They didn't ask the opinions of, like you said, the frontline staff who actually work with the consumers, So I just want to have that diversity at the table. So I've started with the managers, because, oh my gosh, we have longevity here. We've got managers that have worked here for 40 years. I want to know their knowledge. I want them at the table. So that diversity is really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I do want to make mention too, because it probably sounds like sunshine and rainbows. That is not the case, y'all. We have had some very challenging conversations, some opportunities for growth. And I love what you said earlier, Beck, like you got to be open to that feedback, and creating spaces where you can feel honest and sharing that feedback and receiving it and not taking it personally and just taking it as an opportunity to grow is really crucial to this work.
Absolutely. Well, it's really hard to not react in the moment and be like, well, but you don't understand this. You got to make sure you're quiet and reflective. I think D, I'm going to say D, because I'm not sure of your first name, D, but I see you took yourself off mute, so please share.
Okay, hi, I'm Denise.
Denise, nice to meet you.
Yes, nice to meet you. So I just wanted to share kind of an experience. Years ago, I worked for Baltimore City Public Schools, and a very wonderful group of a leadership team who, when you talk about diversity and inclusion and equality, who never felt like if you were the person whether you scrubbed the toilets, was the teacher's assistant, whether you were in the kitchen cooking the food, that you were separate, that you were less than. They always included everyone. And they kind of like took me under their wings, and always made me feel a part. Anytime we had, whatever type of teaching, leadership meetings, I felt special because I was included. And so everywhere that I've worked, I've always gathered the entire group, and you've seen the saying, all hands on deck. And I've always taken a group picture of every color, every nationality, everybody, and that's a part of that group, is a part of that plan, part of that team. We're all special because of who we are, regardless of your color. And I always say, if you cut this person, a white person, and you cut a black person, we're both going to bleed red blood. So we can be unified just because we're human beings. And just by doing that, I never felt less than because I didn't have, a PhD. I felt as big as that person who had the PhD. But it gave me hope and a desire to continue to grow, to continue to feel special about who I was, regardless of the color of my skin. And I think that that's kind of the part that's missing in society, that people think, my first day on my job here, I parked in the wrong spot. And the gentleman said, what kind of car I drive doesn't even matter to me. He said, what kind of car do you drive? You parked in the big people's, they're the big wigs. I'm like, they're no more special. I mean, they've got a parking spot. It's been labeled to them for a certain reason, but it didn't make me feel any less. And not that I was going to continue to park there, but but I didn't feel like I should have to feel any less because you have a title or because you're a certain color. And we need to move away from that. There should be some inclusion here. You shouldn't feel like because a person hasn't obtained a certain whatever, a certain title or whatever, that they're any less important, any less special, but that we all should be included as one big happy family, as I always say.
You said a couple of things there that are really interesting, and I want to make sure to highlight. And I think it goes back to this idea, right, of overcoming hiring and retention issues. Because when we make people feel included, we make them feel like they matter, they stay. I stayed with an organization for almost 12 years, which, for my particular generation does not happen very often. But it was because I felt, really included generally in what I was doing. I felt like I was making a difference. I felt heard, I felt recognized, and I was been given opportunities to grow in that organization. But a couple of things that you said there, right, that I think are important for us to remember, particularly when we have new staff that are coming on board. So I know that all of us have staffing challenges right now. And so one of I've heard it loud and clear. I know it. I feel it. I am sorry. And I'm thinking about creative ways to help in that in any way that I can, if you're a community action agency. But when we are lucky enough to get somebody that wants to join our team, we have to remember that there are things culturally that we forget to tell them about, right, before they start on their first day. And it could be something as simple as a parking spot. And so imagine, right, somebody who wasn't as maybe flexible or thoughtful as you, Denise, that starts on that first day and they're like, what the hell? You're telling me, why does this is a first parking spot? I'm going to park all the way out in no man's land, right? Like that doesn't feel good. And so when we do have people that we're onboarding, I think one of the things that I have failed at miserably, and I've tried to be a better human at in this version of me as I've gotten older and learned, is that I'm trying to think through, like, before somebody starts on that first day, right? What are the most important things that if I was starting a new job, I would want to know? What am I getting for lunch, right? Am I bringing my lunch? Is somebody taking me to lunch? Where do I sit? What door do I go in? Am I even going to the right address? Where do I park? I mean, and those are really simple things, but things that as humans, right, if we've been in the same place for a long time, we forget about. And so that idea of inclusion, just from that perspective, particularly when you are someone who may already be nervous, right? Because you didn't see anybody that looked like you. You didn't see anybody that maybe you saw yourself in. We have to be considerate of those things, not just because we're humans, but also because of that perspective and that lived experience that folks are bringing with them. So I think it's a really important component. Erin, were you going to share something? And that's why you put your video on, not to call you out, but I'm happy to call on you.
No, I think culturally, one of the things that we do here at BCOC when we first bring someone on and we're going through the onboarding process is we kind of have a welcome package for them.
Love that.
That has a fleece jacket that has BCOC's logo on it. We give them a shirt, we give them a backpack with our logo on it, and some of our materials, so that when they're going back to because they come to our administrative office first before they're farmed out to whichever site they're going to work with their supervisor. We want them to feel welcome and included and part of a team. So we have silly stuff like Team BCOC, hashtag Team BCOC stuff, but that's what we just want people to do that. And I can't tell you, I started this jacket thing about 6 years ago when I became the CEO here, and everybody wants a jacket. I have to make sure I buy new jackets every year and they're different ones. I have to make sure that we always have the jackets available and we give them out, as well as these really nice Swiss Army backpacks that, it has the laptop spot for it and everyone can have their stuff in it. I think that, they just feel that they're a part of a team and part of this agency from day one. And then we do a lot of shadow projects. We try to include people in all different parts of the agency so they can get the full exposure to all the different things that BCOC does. So if you come in as a administrative person here in our admin office, you're going to do a day at our Fresh Connect and help to give out food, go to the food pantries, be a part of kind of the whole mission, so that you feel more included in the work that we do here.
Right, that connection is important. Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree with you. And those are some really great things. Care and comfort, things like that, to make you feel welcome, are so important. And I think it's a really basic idea that can help, because right, the first day, think about the first day that you started a new job and it was the worst job you ever had. We all have them. I know you do, right? And it felt really off-putting. There was something that didn't feel right. There were these moments that you think about now and you're like, oh, that was uncomfortable. And you may or may not have stayed. You may have stayed to make it better. I have a savior complex, so I know that I do that very often. I want to fix things, and that's why I stay at places for a long period of time. For others, you might have run for the hills. Like I remember long back, I was still serving tables, and I will not name the restaurant just to be, I won't do that. But I remember the very first day, and I didn't know any of these things, and I met my trainer, and it was so chaotic, and the computer, and there was no flow, there was no rhythm. I didn't understand most of what they were saying. I didn't even necessarily eat at this restaurant on a regular basis. I was just trying to get a job at the time, and it's where I ended up getting hired, right? And by the end of hour 1 of training there, I was like, this is not for me. This is too much. I can't do it. And so the flip side of that is, though, then think about the job that you had that you felt the most included from day one, right? and how much better that felt. And then the likelihood that you want to now tell a friend, oh, I work at this great place. Guess what they did for me? And so, one of the simple things about overcoming hiring and retention is that word of mouth in having your team help to recruit for you. You want them to speak positively about your organization, right? You want them to say, hey, Sally, come and join me at XYZ organization. And you're not going to do that unless you start from that very beginning and that culture piece, which is so critical.
Those are the best referrals that come to us from our employees from within. They're the best candidates for the jobs. I love when someone tells me I have a person that you want to hire. I've got a whole bunch of friends that work here that knew each other from other places, and but they work really well together. And passion for the mission is the most important thing, but just that cohesiveness, that they're willing to help each other out when we're down and when we're short staffed or when we have a crisis going on. So I think that that's really important, that people feel connected.
Well, and I think to that idea, right, part of why I ended up staying so long at that other organization was also because it was family. And yes, you can absolutely ask a question in just a second, Arlene. And I know, Louisa, you took yourself off mute as well. That idea of family, we spend more time as adults with those that we work with than our own families more often than not. Now that's changed since COVID, right? Because a lot of us work from home, I recognize, but largely we are with our coworkers more than we are with our loved ones. And so how we interact with one another is so critical. And that family that we want to create and help folks, right, to help to generate the larger family, right, and continue to make sure we're filling those spots with people who are going to engage and treat each other with that mutual respect. It's helped when you have that great word of mouth. And so simple things you can think about are also, right, opportunities to give people referral bonuses and those kinds of things. It can be something small. It can be, right, you want to give them the jacket. Guess what? They don't get the jacket unless they refer somebody. They don't get the gift card. They don't get the lunch unless they refer somebody, right? So use some simple tactics. This doesn't have to be, right, everybody, like these huge absurd strategies that just feel unreachable. They can be really simple concepts to help drive success in this area. Arlene, what was your question?
Hi, everyone. So I'm relatively new to this line of work. I work for Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network. And like I put in the chat, we provide civil legal aid representation throughout the entire Commonwealth. And so I work for the administrative office, but we've got 14 programs within our network that cover all the counties. And I'm sorry, I didn't catch the lady's name, but she was sharing about the welcome package. I think that was Erin that was talking about that. The welcome packages. And because we have these different programs within our network that are considered to be independent, but they receive their funding from us, I'm just wondering how, for such a large organization that has over 600 employees, how we could do some sort of welcome to make people feel like they're part of a family, because we say we're a family, but we only meet once a year for a statewide conference. And we haven't done that in 2 years because of COVID. And so we've been doing it virtually, but I feel like there are better ways that we can connect with one another so that we can feel more unified. And I'm just wondering if the folks in this group have any suggestions on how to sort of connect with people, even though we might not be seeing them on a daily basis. What can we do to work with our member programs to make people feel connected to us at the administrative office?
So I think that's a really good question, and I'll offer my insight as CAAPs, right? So we're a state association. We work with the 42 agencies in the state. In my former career, I worked with 30 counties throughout Pennsylvania, where we had 10 offices and employees throughout those 10 offices, and I sat in our hub. So it's kind of the same challenge that I have in trying to help all of our agencies feel connected to CAAP and making sure that people understand that they're part of a bigger network. And so I think there's some simple things, right? If you can create relationships with those folks that are in those other offices, so they can help to make sure to engage you and let you know when you have new employees or new folks that are joining, sending a simple welcome email, right? And then following up with a thank you, or what that welcome basket might be, or those items that might be. But it's a part of, I think, first step is, right, you have to have that relationship with those folks so that you can be able to have the path to do it. And so I would suggest, right, you peel back some of those layers to think about what's the first step in trying to create that relationship, and then make sure that you have, where's the person working? Are they working from home? Are they working in an office? If they are working from home and you're not able to get their address, is there an office that they're reporting to that you can make sure to mail them something? Because just getting something so they know who you are, so that when there is a challenge or an issue or a training opportunity or a service that you might be able to provide, they think of you, right, Arlene, as, oh, I should reach out to Arlene. I remember she sent this to me on my first day, or this person at this office sent that to me on this day. So I don't know if anybody else has any thoughts or insight they might be able to offer.
Can I just share my experience?
Sure.
So my experience here with Community Progress, prior to coming, I had the person who recommended me, I had heard a lot about Community Progress Council, but I also heard a lot about the administrator over this particular program, the self-sufficiency. And I heard she was a little powerhouse with lots of energy. And so my first day here, when I got here, well, actually prior to getting here, the communication was warm and welcoming. And I said to the person that told me about the job, is this person always like this? She's always jubilant and friendly and outgoing and seemed to go out of her way. And she said, yes. And when I got here, there was a welcome packet in my seat, all kinds of little goodies. And I tell you, it was warm and welcoming. And this is just my second week here. And each day has been like that since I've been here, thus far. Hope it continues. But it meant something, for someone who had not ever met you, to extend such a warm greeting and to have something prepared for you. And then my second day here, there was a luncheon. We're having Taco Tuesday just for you. And I'm like, wow, I think I'll stay. So I think it means something when people care about how they treat those who are coming to be a part.
And I will say along those lines, so Arlene, I don't think that the task has to just fall to you either. I think if you can recruit one person in each of those offices or in each of those areas that can help you to facilitate this, because that's also when I manage multiple offices of the same organization, that was what helped me to remember, right, that this was something that needed to happen, and they would hold me accountable if I didn't do something. And also just it was a voice of what was happening in that particular space, so that if somebody was struggling, and they also would get, would help me to understand kind of how everybody was feeling. But then they also helped to facilitate a nice welcome to that particular location. Again, it's a little bit more difficult, right, when we're in a world of COVID, but one of the things that I will also share that I recently have done in the last few years is when someone starts, or when I start at a new place, I get a list of their favorites. So what's your coffee order if you drink coffee, if you drink tea? What's your favorite place to eat? What's your favorite snack? What is your favorite candy? Because when we have moments where we want to say thank you to somebody or appreciate them, having that list to go to it's a lot more meaningful for me to send somebody a gift card to Starbucks when they really like Starbucks. And if I as a Starbucks drinker, if I get a Dunkin' card, I'm like, well, you don't know me. And it sounds so silly, but it's true, right? Like, so those are really simple things. I think that if you can find ways of asking those questions when someone starts also, it's a nice way of continuing to say and engage them in conversation. I would say thank you or job well done when you have the opportunity to. So we're coming up surprisingly really quickly to the end here. Louisa, what were you gonna say? Go ahead.
I had a question for the group, but first, Denise, we love you. We appreciate you being here. And Jadira is a rock star. Everything you hear about her is true. But I wanted to ask, because I think what we were talking about in terms of feeling that inclusion, feeling someone is really here to support your journey, be that, a friend at work, be it someone that was a friend before they started working with you, or just someone that kind of gets you. I think that's such an important piece of retention. And like you, Beck, I was a little bit of a job hopper prior to coming here. And it's because I just didn't feel like I could be Louisa and all that this is all the time in those organizations or agencies. And then I kind of found my people. And so we've been talking about how do we create that culture kind of inclusion of helping people find those folks. And I want to ask the group, have you started like an employee resource group or a mentorship program or anything like that to kind of help create those opportunities?
It's a really great question.
I can tell you from our BCOC has a mentor program, relatively new, came out of our most recent employee evaluations, where they gave us some insight on things that we could be doing better. And it really is allowing staff members to pair up and, to share concerns or ideas, or just, have someone to talk to when they're not sure what's going on, or just in general. I think that's one of the things that is helpful. You said something else that I was going to comment on, and now the thought is gone from my head. It'll come back to me, but we do have a relatively new mentorship program.
Lucky for me, I know how to find you.
You do.
I do think making sure along those lines, though, I will share that one of the critical parts that I think are really important from an HR perspective is that making sure that you have some strong statements so that when you do have a candidate that asks some hard questions in the interview process, first of all, you have managers that are trained and understand how to respond to certain questions are very critical. And you've done some mock interviews, which I know is really uncomfortable for everybody, but I have done, that kind of training where I have to sit in the hot seat and do those kinds of questions, and it's uncomfortable. I've even been filmed, right? You have to watch the film back and you have to criticize yourself. It's really terrible, but it has helped me tremendously in my work, making sure that they know how to respond to those questions, the types of questions that they might get, how not to respond to some of those questions. And so, speaking from personal experience, so I am transgender. I have not spoken about it openly at this conference because my journey has been much more broad than that. It's one piece of me, but when I even applied for the job at CAAP, I put in my cover letter, right? I am transgender. I am looking for an organization that is prepared to support me, right, as a leader in that role, and that understands, right, that this is something that is about me, that I'm going to speak about, and that I want to make sure that it fits with me culturally. And kudos to CAAP and the board, and I will say a special shout out to Aaron. It wasn't even a reaction, right? I didn't feel different in that moment. And so as you have more people who are speaking up about who they are, and they want to know, right, does your company match who they are? And am I going to feel welcome and not feel different in some capacity, right? Are you prepared to support that? And so making sure that managers are ready to answer some of those questions, I think we're going to see more really poignant questions as employees and people who are looking for jobs. Quite frankly, they have a lot of choices because there are a lot of opportunities out there for them, particularly when they're skilled. And so if you're going to be able to attract them, you have to be thoughtful about the folks that are going to ask some of those questions and what those questions might be. What are some of the things? So I know if I don't ask this question, Winslow will tear me apart in a team meeting later. What I would like to know from folks before we close, we have about 5 minutes left, or what are some of the challenges that you're facing right now? So we've had some really great conversations so far about some of the resources, about thinking about culture. And that's really, again, where I would just encourage everybody to start to think about this work, is you can't really tackle these bigger questions until you start to talk about culture in your organizations. And that means, yes, HR, but yes, it also means your larger leadership to your organization. But what else? What are some of the challenges that you all are facing right now from a hiring and retention perspective, other than, yes, I know we need to recruit more talent and we need that talent, but is there something else that folks want to talk about, and then I can be thoughtful about making sure to get some resources out to folks? Because this conversation doesn't have to stop at this particular breakout. I'm happy to continue the conversation afterwards. And I'll put my email address in the chat log so that you have it.
Beck, one of the things that we're dealing with at our community action up in Erie is because we're unable to fill a lot of positions, for instance, in our finance department, we're re-looking at the job descriptions and seeing what kind of qualifications we want from people. So, you know, of course, community action, the pay is not, you know, where we would like it to be. And we were really trying to get people in that had 5 to 7 years, 20 years with an accounting background to do, you know, a job that possibly somebody right out of college, somebody with, you know, a couple years experience or a 2-year degree could do. So we're having a lot of conversation about that. I didn't know if anybody else was doing that type of discussion.
But I'll say that, go ahead, Rita.
At Head Start, I've been trying to have that conversation with my directors for a couple of years now. And of course, the trick is to assure that you don't set the bar so low that you get 2,000 applicants, of which 3 might be qualified, but also not setting it so high that you are excluding people. I mean, I think that's going to be one of our foci in regard to trying to address assuring more inclusivity and diversity in our work group.
So prior to coming here, I worked as a director of operations at an organization called Communities in Schools, and I was doing all of their hiring and updating all of their employee handbooks and process and procedure. And part of what I talked about a lot with leadership is you've had this standard, right, of having people with a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and we're only paying $30,000, $40,000 a year for these particular positions. We have to start to think about either our wages or our expectations, because you're turning down a lot of really great candidates and they are more than qualified through their experience. They may not have the degree that you're looking for, but I would ask the question of those of us who happen to have bachelor's degrees, how many of us actually use our bachelor's degrees? I have a bachelor's in 7th and 12th grade. I'm certified in 7th through 12th grade English and history. I taught English for 7th grade for like a hot minute, and then I went to do something else, and I've never revisited. So I think if, you know, we think about that, it's really important considering people who have associate's degrees and some of that lived experience, oftentimes you find are the best employees because they want an employer to take a chance on them, right? And they're going to work harder for you than anybody else. Thank you for that. Well, I would just say, again, if you have challenges when it comes to hiring and
everybody, it looks like we're coming back. I'm not sure if everybody's back in the room, but looks like we're all back. I'm actually wanted to do, just go around to our facilities, a quick debrief of the rooms. I was in the room with Understanding the DEI Continuum. We had a really rich conversation about accountability and making sure we implement this work across systems, making sure we understand, you know, what's missing and what we need more of. So we had a really good conversation. I'll ask some of our other facilitators if they want to share out kind of what came out of their room. We'll start with Beck. Is Beck on the call? Yep. All right.
Sorry, I was just getting myself off mute. So, right, we had a great conversation in our group. Thank you to those of you who shared a little bit and were part of the conversation. We really focused mainly on simple things that we can do from a culture perspective, because really when you think about hiring and retention issues from a perspective of DE&I, it's about, right, some culture things that have to happen first before you're really prepared to inject your organization in policy and procedure and have some deeper conversations about these topics. And so we really went, you know, and talked about some simple things that you can do to create a culture of inclusivity from the day someone starts, and how that drives opportunities to potentially create word of mouth and referrals for other employees, and the excitement that your team may generate as a result of really simply just being welcomed into your organization. And so what I was sharing sort of at the very end of our discussion was also about just that. I know CAAP, we are talking about opportunities to help in this area of HR in the future. And so if there is a challenge that you're having, please by all means reach out to us. We're happy to talk you through it or point you in the direction of someone who can be more helpful than we are, and or offer a best practice of those of you who are on the call today.
Great, thanks Beck. I'll turn to Libro. Libro, can you share a little bit about your group and what came out?
So we were talking about a program to drive equity in the community, and we had a really rich conversation with lots of responses and engagement. People talked about the challenge of the lack of resources to have programs that really push equity. We talked about the need for training and education of staff teams. We talked a lot about data and other forms of research in order to both assess the equity needs, but also to measure impact and to measure success. And there were some great ideas, for instance, about multiple organizations coming together to share programs, so that together maybe the groups have the resources to do education or training or to develop new programs. There was also discussion about partnering with statewide or national groups that could provide certain capacities that the groups don't have themselves. And one last one, just another great example, is there was a lot of talk about the digital divide and the impact that's had that is, deepening inequities sometimes in the provision of service and the program work, and how to overcome the fact that many constituents that folks are trying to serve don't have access to digital tools or computers, et cetera. So there was a lot more than that, but it was a great group with lots of discussion.
Great, thanks, Libro. And just for everyone, we have notes that we've captured. We're going to do our best to share out the notes from each room in the post-summit material so that you can feel like you were there, even though you weren't. Looks like they were really rich conversations. And we'll go to George to kind of share out his group and what you all came out of that with.
My group was amazing, Winslow. I had some amazing participants. I had some people that were shy that we needed to kind of squeeze and get some information out of. But a lot of what was really coming from our session, and our session was expanding access to services. And first we talked a lot about what those challenges are already, and then we applied the DEI lens to the conversation. So things that came up were training. So more training is needed. We talked about professionals of color for statistics that mirror the communities they serve. We talked about literacy and literature in other languages outside of Spanish. We had a very active participant by the name of Loina de Jesus from the Central Pennsylvania Food Bank, who talked about literacy and literature not being available in other respective languages, whether it's Nepalese or Arabic, not just Spanish, and so forth. We also talked about the lack of cultural foods that those communities would feel most comfortable with and need. But I love that Loida also said, we eat Chinese food too, we can eat Arabic food too. So those communities also need to be open to learning about how to cook other people's foods. Being accepting of other people's education levels, more accepting of talents learned in other countries. So if someone was a social worker in their country, why do they have to come here and do it all over again if that's something they already graduated in their country and they have expertise for? So us as employers, as communities, being more accepting and welcoming of those international educations. Having more empathy and understanding, don't judge other people's dialects or language skills, and really kind of build people up. Helping to change the mindset was a really big discussion as well. And I also liked that we talked about asking the why, and why do we keep doing things this way? Challenge the existing processes, to help streamline new ways of doing things and reaching more communities. And ultimately, when we added all of those challenges and we talked about DEI, really what came to it is helping to change the mindset of people, and providing more education and understanding cultures. And then we also talked about creating a more diverse workforce, and the challenges that went along with that was sort of creating access to apply for services, access to internet. So, when you talk about access to internet, it goes along with what was just mentioned around the technology divide and the internet access divide, and so forth. And then one of the biggest challenges in the areas of DEI as it relates to expanding services is being understanding of the scope of the family dynamics that could change weekly as members of the house might come in to stay with someone because they're homeless for a few weeks, how those income guidelines of the household size can affect someone from qualifying for assistance versus not qualifying for assistance.
Thanks, George. George and I are going to be best friends. He doesn't know it, but anyway, he doesn't know it yet. But I'm just so glad that you all had a really rich conversation, and all of that to say, as we start to kind of wind down this 2-day conversation, all of the points that everyone made is really helpful. We're capturing as much as we can. We're going to get all of this stuff back out to you. This was just a great learning space. And we have one more space that we wanted to kind of move to where it's really going to help us kind of bring everything together. So we were blessed, if I can use that word, to have the chair of our CAAP Equity Committee, Ms. Vanessa Filbert, who is going to really give us some closing remarks on not just this day, but yesterday, the summit in general, what the intent and purpose was, and really kind of focusing us on what's next. And we talked about that in our group in terms of this continuum. Where do we go from here? So after Vanessa speaks for a bit, we're going to come back, do some quick closing remarks on the summit, some logistics, and then we're going to wrap up. So I will turn this to Vanessa and we will take it from there.
All right, great. No pressure when they do the spotlight thing on Zoom. It gets real focused here, guys and gals. Well, I just wanted to start by saying thank you. I've been able to be on throughout yesterday and today, and really trying to take on the space of learner observer. To be curious, those of us who are committed to this work of equity, I think there's a lot of value when we take on the role of learner and we can hold that posture, because this is a journey. And it's one that even as a person of color or as a woman or whatever kind of marker that I check, I'm still learning. And I need to show up with curiosity and with care when we talk about this conversation in regards to equity. So I just want to thank you all for your participation and thank the expertise that's been on, the last 2 days. And really a big, I don't know those of you, if we all know how to use our annotation on our Zoom, but a big round of applause to Winslow and Beck and the team at the Community Action Association of Pennsylvania. So much intentionality and care in developing this work. And this time together. And, I'm one that believes deeply in that when we sow with good intention, we reap really good things. And I believe that this is the beginning of a really great season for the Community Action Association of Pennsylvania. And I'm really excited about the leadership and the compassion and desire to build equity and to come alongside. I heard that today at one of the panels, right? We're coming alongside, and that's the value that the association brings for us to not only community actions, but to all of you who are part of this work, is that there is a space to come alongside so that we can help with the burden of the weight, right? And that's the value of walking alongside people. So I just want to thank Beck and Winslow and the team and Leslie and all their contributions to make this really, really just so well done. So I have 4 key points. I might give you back time. I'm from Brooklyn and I talk fast sometimes. So you guys get what you get and you don't get upset.
That's right.
That's right. So one is a lot of gratitude. I guess my first question, and I want you guys to use the chat box, is I want you to really quickly chime in and tell me, time is so valuable. And for those of us who do direct service work with customers, we are so clear that oftentimes people just don't have time to do all the things that they need. As professionals, as family members, sisters, brothers, husbands and wives and partners and community members, there's just never enough time. So I want you to put in the chat, why did you make the time for this over the last 2 days? What drew you in? What was that compelling piece that said, no, this is important to me? Tell me the why. So we'll look at the chat. I'd love to see some of that really quick. I'm going to open up my chat box here and I just want to see why. Oh, better together. I love that so much. So good. Help as many folks as we can, learning, growing, just to be part of community and to learn together. Oh, I love this idea. And I just, it takes a village, right? This idea that it takes all of us. DEI is part of my purpose and informs everything that I do. Love that. connection to the work and to others. Just this piece of humanity, unidos, unity, so many good reflections. I just want to honor your time and say, I know time is valuable. And it's important that we prioritize how we spend our time. So thank you all for that. The second thing I want to say is that I was listening to the panel discussion and someone mentioned the word lament. And I kind of love that word. I'm learning to love it. It's not something that I probably loved early on in life, but I'm learning to find an appreciation for grief and for lamenting the things that have cost something. So I'm going to leave you with 3 L's, a little different than one of our panelists, but lament is one of them. And when we think about this work of equity, that you would create space for yourselves to lament, to think about the things that have been a wound to you or a wound to those that you care for. And it's okay to grieve that and to create lament for that. And that there's a holiness in that. The next L I'll say is, that we always lean into a lesson. How can we show up curious about ourselves? And I think there was someone on the panel that talked about these kind of 3 spheres of learning around individual, interpersonal, and institutional. So how do we take that triad and really think about, as I lament the things and as I lean into learning, what are the lessons that I take for me as an individual, interpersonally, in my relationships, and institutionally? Because that lesson helps us to think about strategy. What can we actually do to make change moving forward? And the last one is about leaping. And how do we leap? When we think about equity work, I think, there's an opportunity for people of color to sometimes feel like, or those who are underrepresented, like it's our job to always leap. And it's really an invitation for those folks who are, especially for those who maybe are in the straight community or the white community, to be the ones to have the courage to leap. And I've been doing some reflecting. I've been listening to some podcasting recently about regret. And this author, Daniel Pick, is talking about regret. And he's basically saying he surveyed 4,000 people, all these different areas of regret. Should have asked the girl out, should have quit the job, should have started a business. But what was the common thread wasn't the topic. It was not having the courage. And that for me was just so resounding when I was thinking about spending a few minutes with all of you and thinking about what is the secret sauce of equity work, and it is courage. And I will ask you to continue to leap forward, to look for the opportunities where you can be courageous, where you don't wish that you would have said, say that, tell me what you meant by that, or I don't agree with that, or I think this isn't about equity, and I think we got to have a different conversation. So I'm just challenging you to really think about where in the spaces can we lament, where can we lean in and listen to our lessons, and then where do we leap? Because that's the beauty of the world. We get to do those things over and over again. So next quick thing that I'm going to have you do in the chat is that you've been spending the last 2 days really kind of taking in lots of good information and learning from each other. But I'm really curious that if we look at tomorrow and we say we're all back together again, and it's February 16th, is that the right date? Whatever date it is, 2027, I'm close. 2027, right? And it's 5 years from now. I want you to plug in the chat. What would we be celebrating 5 years from today that we got right when it came to this conversation around equity? So just think about one thing that would be different, that we would have gotten right in our pursuit of equity if we're here 5 years from today. Higher wages, harmony, love it. Wage equity, I'm here for it. Oh, feeling safe, better communication, acceptance. It's great. Learning more, improved education, equality, unity, lots of unity. Housing inclusivity, love that. Justice, more tolerance, more opportunity. No background checks. Oh, love that too. More inclusion. Yeah, understanding. Talking and growing. We would be in a different place 5 years from now. So I think my job today was to, one, celebrate the work that you've done. Think about how we continue to have energy moving forward. And I think for me, it's always around joy. and where I can find celebration. So if there's anything that helps reinvigorate us, it's usually pretty easy to do when we come from a really good conference. We're kind of like re-energized, and we're with people that maybe are like-minded, and that feels really good. But my commentary to you today is to think about the ways that you can be moving that agenda forward so that you can celebrate and that these things become actualized, and they're not just kind of an imagination of what we think the future can be, but it's an aspiration that we can get to. So the last thing I'll say is that there's a little piece of a poem by the brilliant Maya Angelou, and it's her poem called Our Grandmothers. It's a great poem. Obviously she's Maya Angelou, she's great all day. But one comment here that has stuck with me for a really long time that I think has been a space in which I'm trying to show up with urgency and with care and with a lot of reverence for the opportunity that I have as a woman of color to lead our local community action, but also to be the first in the history of our community to do this work in that leadership role. So I walk with a sense of a lot of privilege, but there's a line that says, I come as one, but I stand for 10,000. And I do believe that equity work is exactly that. I come as one, but I'm standing for the group. And I think what that passage says to me always is that I am my ancestors' dreams come true, but I'm also the hope for the generations to come. So as I'm coming as myself, I'm always bringing all those generations with me. And I hope that you will do the same as you think about the ways that you will continue to be courageous, compassionate, and curious on your equity journey. So Winslow, I don't know if I did what I was supposed to do, but that's what you got. And it's great.
Well, and I'm thinking to myself, leave it to her to make me tear up, right?
Oh, I did my job, y'all.
You did your job, right? So Vanessa, I can't tell you how thankful we are that you took some time. I think it was a perfect way to wrap it up and give us hope for tomorrow and give us hope for 1, 10, 5, 15, 50 years from now. So thank you for that. And thank you for sharing those comments. Before we do quick closing remarks, and we're going to give some time back, I see, and I know our CEO is like, yay, let's give some time. Before we do any closing remarks, I wanted to have Leslie, if you can share a little bit of just housekeeping next steps on things that we may share out after this group, and then I'll do some quick thoughts about wrapping up.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so I really appreciate everybody coming today and your participation. This was great. I'm going to put a survey in the chat for you. Should you complete that survey within 48 hours, I will send you a certificate. The certificate will be a certificate of attendance. So we just really want to get some feedback about this event, kind of get a feel for how it went and how it could go in the future, and if we want to have it again in the future. Everything will be sent out via email to the registrants. So I'm collecting all the materials. I'm going to have to get these notes from everybody that happened in these breakout rooms. You have to give me just a chance to get all that together, as well as to get the recordings uploaded. So once we have everything together and we feel we have a good comprehensive email, I'll get everything out to everybody. So I think that's the logistics on my end, Winslow.
Great, thanks, Leslie. And I will tell everybody who's here, those certificates are real. You know, that survey, we want to hear from you. We want to know how we did. We want to know what we could do better if we decide to do this again. And so thanks, Leslie, for doing that. I really do like the idea that folks can feel like they have a takeaway and really see this as a learning space for all of us. I'm going to just close by saying what I've been saying for the last 2 days. I'm thankful that you all came. I'm thankful for the learning that we had. And I'm thankful for everybody who contributed to this these last 2 days. It was a learning experience for us. It teaches us what we need to know more of. And so I'm just appreciative of the opportunity to just bring everyone together. And to me, that was also the most important thing, is to really create a space for this work. I'm just super excited. Well, let me not use that phrase. I am very excited about all of the relationships that we've been able to establish over the last 2 days. I'm going to spend lots and lots of time connecting with people, George and Michael and Dr. Livingston, and really beginning to, when I think about implementation and when I think about expanding this work, I think about relationships and the folks that we're going to be in contact with. So I'm really excited about that. That is my wrap up. Beck, I don't know if you wanted to say one other comment before we close up. I would love for you to kind of take us out if you can. I'm putting you on the spot.
Sure, absolutely. I just want to say thank you again to everybody. As I said yesterday, really just encourage people to be change-making leaders. And I look forward to future conversations around all of these topics. And I hope that this is the first of many summits to come where we can continue to grow in our understanding and get into deeper conversations. So thank you all. Gracias, and have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
Gracias.
Much.
See you. Thank you. It was awesome.